So here's part B of number 4 from the 2014 A, B, and BC exam. And we have a train and its velocity measured at different values of t. And then in part B here it says, do the data in the table support the conclusion that train A's velocity is negative 100 meters per minute at some time between 5 and 8? Give a reason for your answer. So anytime you want to try and figure out whether or not a certain function has to equal something else, it's going to go back to one of two ideas, either the intermediate value theorem or the mean value theorem. You're going to go with the mean value theorem if the question is asking you whether or not the derivative of something has to equal a certain value. And it's going to be the intermediate value theorem if it asks you something along the lines of whether or not the function itself has to equal a certain value. Now this is kind of a weird situation because we have a question about velocity equaling negative 100. Well, velocity is the derivative of position, but we actually also have values of the velocity function here. Excuse me. I'm going to go with this first. I'm going to try to see if I can use this. Now, in order to use this, I need to convince myself that I'm allowed to. So the only hypothesis for the intermediate value theorem is that you have to be dealing with a continuous function. We'd be trying to apply the intermediate value theorem to a velocity function. A velocity function is continuous since an object always has a velocity. It's always either moving forward, moving backward, or it's stopped. So velocity is continuous, so that allows us to use the intermediate value theorem. Now if you look at this t value in the table, at the t value of 5, we know that velocity is 40. So the point on the velocity graph at the t value of 5 is positive 40, and the point on the velocity graph at the t value of 8 is negative 120. So if you thought about what this means graphically for a minute, it tells you that 5, 40 is on your graph. So this is a quick sketch of the velocity graph. 5, 40 is on the graph, and then also 8, negative 120 is on the graph. So this y value down here is negative 120. This y value up here is positive 40. How do you get from this point to this point with a graph that's continuous without crossing every value in between? And negative 100 would clearly be a y value that's intermediate, or a v value that's intermediate or between 40 and negative 120. Well, the answer to that question is you can't. You can't get from this point to this point with a continuous graph without crossing the value of negative 100 at some point, at least once, in between 5 and 8. So does the data support this, or do the data support this? Yes. Why? Well, it's a continuous function, therefore the intermediate value theorem applies. And I guess before we wrap up this video, I should say that you'd want to write out what I just stated and not just leave the work that I have on the screen here as your final answer. You'd want to give a concluding statement, which I stated verbally, and I'm not going to write out.